Welcome to the Friends with Money podcast, brought to you by Money Magazine, creating financial freedom for Australians since 1999.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Friends with Money podcast. My name is Tom Watson, a senior journalist here at Money Magazine, and it's great to be back in your ears. Today we're delving into a topic that I'm sure many of us can relate to and perhaps have even indulged in a bit over the last 2 years. Yes, we are talking about retail therapy, and also related to that, why spending money actually makes us feel good. Well, some of the time, that is. So to help us guide us through today's topic, I'm pleased to say that we're joined by financial therapist Jane Monica Jones. Welcome, Jane. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here.
So to start us off, what do we actually mean by retail therapy? And has it always been around, or is it more of a product of our modern world?
Well, I think it's the idea of retail therapy is this idea that we get a little bit of a kick or a little bit of self-soothing by actually purchasing something that we want. And when we say purchasing, we're talking about discretionary spending. So more of our wants than our needs. But it's that little bit of a kick or a little bit of self-soothing that we get from purchasing something. Now, it's been around as a postmodern concept that's, from the early 20th century, really, where women in the Depression used to buy lipstick as a bit of a pick-me-up from the drudgery of, depressed economic times. So it's certainly been around for a while. Retail therapy was coined in the 80s when consuming and purchasing as a pastime really kind of started to grow. So it's certainly a modern thing. It's not been around for that long, but it certainly in its inception has grown and grown and grown in something that we do.
That's so interesting. I had no idea about the link to the Depression, but interesting to hear that. I guess it makes me want to ask you as well, because in my head, when I think of retail therapy, I think about, spending on clothes, spending on shoes, those kind of things. But does it extend beyond that?
It certainly does. I think we often presume that it's just women that are doing retail therapy, which is clothes and shoes and handbags. But in fact, what I see with my clients and the people that I work with is that it crosses gender, crosses socioeconomic cohorts, as well as age groups as well. So it really is universal. I have lots of male clients that come in who have basically had their wives insist that they go and get some help because their coffee making paraphernalia has got out of control, or their car purchasing has got out of control, or their boat purchasing has got out of control. So it really touches all parts of our community, and it doesn't matter whether you have a lot or a little. It touches many people. So we often think that it's mostly a domain of women, but it certainly is the domain of men as well.
I kind of gave us a bit of a throwaway line in the intro about spending during the pandemic, something that I think I did to a degree because of the boredom associated with it. But do you think as a whole, more people have been drawn towards retail therapy over the past 2 years?
Look, I think so. And I don't think it's just because we're sitting in front of a screen. There has been, I think I heard recently that councils and garbage pickup has increased exponentially, which says that people are purchasing more, which means they're chucking out more. Things like depressions, the pandemic, recessions, it scales up our adversity or a sense of anxiety and stress, these kind of adverse experiences, and so that we feel more stressed because there's a level of safety and uncertainty that is escalated. So humans don't do very well under adversity, unfortunately. Interestingly, here in Australia, there's a report called the Ilian Report that came out in August 2020 about consumer spending. And it said that 64% of the superannuation that people could get access and draw down was actually spent on clothing, furniture, restaurants, gambling, and alcohol. So
Cheers.
that's pretty kind of scary that money that is meant to be for our superannuation and for our long term has gone on discretionary spending. So it just shows that we, under adversity, don't behave so great. And purchasing has been part of that. Retail therapy has been part of that.
So you've touched on part of the next question that I wanted to get into in terms of the kind of what makes us want to indulge in retail therapy. But what's kind of going on in our brain, which also makes it feel good for us?
Yeah, look, there has been, so it is stress. When we are under stress or excitement, whenever the kind of nervous system is activated or aroused, we have what's happens in our brain is cortisol. Now, cortisol, its function is we often think it's just stress and it's kind of bad. Well, actually, it's not. Its purpose is to put a whole bunch of energy into the system to either focus, to exert something, to perform something in some way. But long term, it has bad effects on our nervous system and our levels of health. It's time limited. Cortisol in the body should be just time limited. So what happens in our brain is that we have levels of cortisol running through, which is keeping us focused, keeping us kind of in line. And then we have dopamine. Now, dopamine comes in as a way to down-regulate the nervous system, but more particularly, its purpose is to pursue. If we were in the wild still, living in a more of a primal existence, it's a motivation to get us to hunt or to procreate. Now, interestingly about dopamine, it's not actually in the acquisition, as in getting the food or getting the shoes. It's actually motivates us to pursue. So we often think that we're getting the hit or the high when we actually purchase the pair of shoes, but actually we're getting it before. It's motivating us to go out and hunt for food, hunt for procreation, or hunt for a pair of shoes. So it's actually a really great thing to know that it's actually in the pursuit and not in the acquisition. Its purpose is to motivate us to go out there. So in fact, just window shopping or, searching online and putting it into the cart will give us that hit. It doesn't necessarily mean that we'll get the hit when the shoes arrive.
That's so interesting. So does that mean that it doesn't really matter how much you spend or whether you spend it all then to that point? It's all about that initial kind of act before the actual purchase.
That's right. So look, I don't know whether how much you spend or, whether it's large amounts or small amounts will actually increase levels of dopamine. But my guess is that dopamine comes in at whatever level. There may be, with a bigger purchase, there might be more levels of stress because it's more of a commitment, so that we might have to have more hits of dopamine. But the way I work with clients is actually getting them imagining something that they want to purchase, and then they get that happy high. So just to know that we don't actually have to spend money, get ourselves into debt or whatever, but we can actually just imagine that we've got those fabulous shoes and we'll get that sense of relief or that dopamine kick.
So maybe you could go into that a little bit more then, Jane, in terms of what you recommend, or you talk through your clients in terms of ways that they can combat that kind of spending, that addictive spending.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things that I do is just using that meditation. But I also have this fabulous resource on my website if people want to go and check out my work under my resources page, which is 21 ways to improve our dopamine levels for financial well-being. And these are things like meditation, connecting with nature, yoga, even whistling. That's something that we don't often do, but the nature of actually doing the out breath that we could do in meditation actually down regulates the nervous system. It actually creates dopamine and serotonin when we whistle. Now, I remember there used to be whole lots of people that used to whistle when I was growing up, and we don't do that so much anymore. Even learning something new will also create dopamine and serotonin, playing an instrument. So these are other ways that we can get that happy high without necessarily doing retail spending.
I did not expect whistling to come up in today's episode, but
Exactly.
but there you go. Something I should have touched on previously, but I think it's important to talk about is any signs that people should watch out for that, maybe it's a family member or a friend that they're starting to see, spending more than maybe they should be, or maybe within themselves to kind of be more aware about their spending.
Yeah, look, for me, my baseline with working with people around financial well-being is that we should be saving or paying off a mortgage. We need to be building for the future, essentially, and having minimal or zero bad debt. Yeah. So if you're getting into debt because of your spending, which is bad debt, there's no kind of benefit in the long term of having that sort of debt, then I think that's a problem. If you are consuming to the extent that you are getting into bad debt, or it's become compulsive, or it's taking up a lot of your leisure time or social time, then I think we've got a problem. So, the thing is that socially and psychologically, we have linked so much around spending and purchasing, even economically. Most economies are based on us consuming, which is challenging. So it's a real sort of social norm that spending is linked so much to our pleasure, our stress relief, even celebration and boredom. It's so ingrained in who we are as modern humans. It certainly didn't exist like this 100 years ago, where we may have connected more with people. So if it's getting out of control, if it is taking up a large portion of your pleasure and your leisure, I think we need to look at that, say that there may be some challenges around that.
And on one final note then, if people are feeling like it's becoming a problem, it is serious, where should they go to get help?
So in Australia, we have access to financial counsellors, of which anyone can access the services that they do. They help people in crisis. So if you are in debt, we have the National Debt Hotline. You can just search National Debt Hotline and you can find out the details for that. You can also come and work with me. I work a lot with people around debt issues and so the chronic getting into debt, chronically overspending, or even speak to a counsellor that, bring that issue if you're seeing someone as well. I also have created a program called Hey Big Spender, which is actually a course that looks at how we can do different ways of getting those sort of more nourishing and natural strategies for better mental health or better financial health. So, but yeah, maybe even take up whistling might be something as simple as doing that, something kind of new that can really help deal with the stress of, when we have lots of pressures at the moment. So there's plenty of help out there.
Jane, this has been a fascinating chat. And again, whistling is not something that I thought was going to come up here, but it's funny that it has. So thank you for sharing all of your insights. And it's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Lovely to be here.
And don't forget that if you enjoy listening to Friends with Money, you can really help us out by recommending it to your own friends or family, or by leaving us a review on iTunes or the Apple Podcast app. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss out on our future episodes. If you have any questions, comments, or story ideas, we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to send them our way via our dedicated email, which is podcast@moneymag.com.au. And last but not least, be sure to head over to moneymag.com.au to keep up to date with all the latest financial news and views. That's it for today, though. But Friends with Money will be back in your feeds next week. I'm Tom Watson. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Friends with Money podcast. For credible, independent and easy to understand financial commentary, visit moneymag.com.au. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are general in nature, and further independent advice and research based on your personal circumstances should be sought before making an investment decision.